adding more on to that, but I'm really excited to be here, and thank you UBS for giving me this privilege. So in the next couple of minutes, while there are slides that I'll kind of refer to, but it's more about so if you see the topic that that I speak about is kind of crystal gazing in the future to some extent, right? So so it's a combination of, let's say, where we are and what we see currently, the trends, etc., which kind of indicates where we could go or where we could be, but as technology changes, the way of working changes. So without much ado, let's move on. So obviously, I think this is from Marshall Goldsmith. All of us are aware, but I think the key thing here is obviously that the gap, or and in the next part of the discussion, we'll see that the way we have been doing things, the way we have been thinking, we need to reimagine, and probably some of that reimagining is happening now. Now there are two things which is driving that. One is of course internal within the organization, but a large part of it is external, driven by a lot of factors. But for shared services, GBS models to be more successful, evolve, there has to be let's say much more evolution in the thinking process, and that's what we will kind of talk about. So I'm a finance guy, so you see finance charts. Please bear with me. So we try to kind of look at what's happening, what is the feeling now in this community of shared services. So there's a survey done by the Shared Services Outsourcing Network 2022, and I just picked up a couple of data points on that. So the first histogram, the first chart is basically internally within their organizations, right? What is the theme of let's say the priorities in terms of which the shared services part of the organization is engaging with the rest of the organization. So historically it used to be things around cost and I think things around process excellence, etc., and they have not gone away, they are still there. But increasingly we see that more than cost, we talk about the end customer experience, the problem solving of, let's say, business issues, business partnering, innovation. So there is this shift of let's say what shared services kind of engages from a priorities perspective, and how shared services brand themselves internally. And that's also reflected in the way a lot of the newer shared services are also probably naming, right? So you have more of the new ones being like innovation hubs and global delivery partners, integrated business services, and and there's a whole concept behind it, moving away from the traditional, let's say, just shared services, global business services. And I know there are later sessions which will probably get into a little bit of what is shifting, why, and how that is becoming a value driver for shared services. And the other interesting fact is from the poll that the top 3 priorities in 2022 are on these 4. Now, why is it 4 and why is it top 3? So there was a host of factors, but these 4 are among the top 3 in the poll that was conducted. And if you see, it's all about, somewhere it's digitizing data, automation, rethinking operating model, AI, etc. So there's a whole lot of technology that is, and the digital landscape that is driving the thinking currently. There are of course other factors, there are hybrid, remote, virtual, etc. They're also there, but they did not factor on the top 3 in the minds of the shared services leaders, and that for me was very interesting. I thought I would see hybrid right on top, I didn't see that. So, and there is an interesting correlation, because this is driving the priorities, and that the value that is then getting generated comes back here, right, in terms of the enriching the customer experience, or getting into, like, say, problem solving at an enterprise level, and of course business partnering, innovation, etc. And it's just moved away from just, let's say, just cost optimization, process excellence, delivering on time, etc. Right? So, so we see that internal shift that is currently happening, and this is just going to grow. And then externally, I will not go into much. All of us recognize it's just chaotic in the external environment. Different industries impacted by different aspects. Some of it is conflict, some of it is economy, some of it is strange events. I don't know how many of us even remember this US thing that happened in the middle of last year, and then kind of supply chain came crashing down out of the sky, right? And then we also have, let's say, government interventions, for example, which maybe those are more sector specific. I come from Philips, which is a health technology leader. So anything on the MDR, the medical device regulations, which gets updated, affects us in the way we operate our business models, for example. Similarly, GDPR and others have wide ranging, maybe for different businesses. So it's a host of things that is changing. Some are known, some like in the sense that at least for regulatory changes, you get to know, you can plan for it to some extent. Some are events that just fall from the sky. But why are we talking about this? Because I think the wider organization then expects the shared services part of the organization to step up in their game and be part of the solutioning for such events. Yeah? So we will talk about why this is important and how this can be a game changer, both in terms of the opportunities it creates. I think someone was telling me that conflicts and kind of some of the challenges globally are also a silver lining or an opportunity for shared services. Well, that's a very, not the best way to position it that way, but it is a fact that more often than not, it can be a priority if we step up our game, right? So if I just go into the next one. So just talking about how we are evolving and what is driving that evolution. So this is where we traditionally were, right? And focusing on cost, operational effectiveness, process, and maybe a lot of it is relevant. We still keep doing it, but the organizational asks are obviously stepping up. Now, as we have evolved from, let's say, just shared services, which were like single functions or one or two functions focused, right? Finance shared services, or I don't know, HR shared services, and so on and so forth. We have now multiple functions, and I think in the same survey that I saw from Shared Services Network, when they polled the type of services, there were 30, 35 services that they were able to kind of, the gamut of all business operations are somewhere or the other. Of course, different levels of penetration maybe, but it's all there. So then there is the ask, and is how do we manage those processes more cross-functionally, right? How do global functions, finance, HR, IT, and all that. But we also have a lot of support for our order management, our customer engagement, order fulfillment, the way we help drive the engagement with the customers. Traditionally, for a business like Philips, whose health technology means we deal with, let's say, caregivers, hospitals, etc., who buy products, services, whether they are devices or systems, etc. So if somebody is setting up a new hospital, they need a complete end-to-end, let's say, help and planning, not only in terms of the equipment, but in terms of the software, the solutions in place, the trainings, etc. And it's a multi-year deal that normally happens. And then the revenue is also kind of over a period of time, etc. And to a large part, it is shared services that increasingly these days I find which plays a valuable role in enriching or making sure the customer has the right expectations and it's fulfilled. And it's even and to relate it to the earlier slide, for example, during COVID period when ventilators, hospital patient monitoring, etc., were in high demand. So the organization, the GBS, needed that agility to turn around and start and stop things, to focus on what mattered the most for the immediate time. Just moving on, so I think the progress is more towards about the integrated innovation capabilities and more towards enterprise goals, right? We move away from just let's say the value that currently the way we traditionally set up shared services goals in terms of either cost or in terms of SLAs, etc., into what is the enterprise goal for the year, for the moment, and then how do we calibrate that, right? So a business, a typical organization might have many businesses, and depends on what is the maturity of the business. Some might be growing, some may be mature, some may be on a decline phase, and then they need variable, let's say, support in terms of what they're trying to do in that space. So the mindset change is more in terms of, and it doesn't matter whether it's captive, whether it is outbound. The ask is moving towards how much we, and when we say we, it's not the head of shared services or the CFO, or it's more about the middle management and the individual participants in that process, understand the business, where it is headed and what needs to change to accomplish that. So if you are maybe growing, I don't know, GMV or top line, for example, then that needs to work differently from somewhere where we are trying to grow just market share or look at our margins. And that thinking needs to percolate at a much more operating level. So and that is the ask that is going that's going to be there more and more. And then I think at the end it could even reach, and we are talking maybe long term, 2 years, 4 years, I don't know, beyond 2025, is probably the line between shared services and the rest of the organization is not going to be the way it is currently. So the branding might totally change, and we might not even identify something as shared service. It's like a function. If it's sales throughout, right? And it's at supply chain, then supply chain throughout, finance and finance throughout. In Philips, we are consciously working towards, for example, not to call ourselves as, let's say, GBS finance. We are finance, end of story. It doesn't matter if a business leader is reaching out to somebody in Bangalore, Chennai, or somebody based out of Amsterdam. You're reaching out to finance. So, but it also requires then that capability building, etc., which someone should be able to execute seamlessly, to have that depth in the skill level, the maturity level, etc. So it's a gradual process, and I think 75% expansion mode. I think there will be a few barriers. So it's not like we can run the total business from shared services end state. They could be like you have transfer pricing barriers, right? You can't create a PE for tax reasons, and so certain things have to be in country, etc. It could be other stuff, data privacy, and then talent could be a game changer in terms of where we could have it and where we can't. So from a staging evolution, I think mostly a lot of us could be between the first two. I think the one in the middle, the third one, is where probably we are heading towards, and then the end state could be that. I just have 1 or 2 slides more, so probably I'll finish them. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. Thank you. So I'll rush it. So I'll not talk more about it because I know there are a few sessions planned later to go more in depth. But I think we all recognize that maybe these are things which are there, and then the bottom one is not very readable, but it's all the connectivity, the Zoom and the Teams and everything that helped us through the pandemic is evolution. I think a lot of the ones in the middle, some are in various stages of implementation, some are still more futuristic, like the use cases for blockchain, etc., may not be all pervasive across industries. But then I think the end state is about how it all comes together and creates that value for business, or totally changes the way we do business. And this is not value for shared services, this is value for at an enterprise level at a whole. Now, with this, I just briefly touch upon again this one. So what's going to change from a future perspective, talent perspective? I think we need to again reimagine the hybrid part in terms of remote versus virtual versus working from anywhere. Leverage technology. I mean, technology is here, and it's an enabler to do things in a certain way, in an optimized way. So we can't create, let's say, organizational boundaries that do not leverage the right technology. Then that runs counter to the talent. maybe a debatable point. Talent war is just going to increase, and already we read, we hear, we see, I feel the pinch of attrition. And it's not only local, right? I'm not even, let's say, managing attrition because the vacancies are here. The vacancies are in UK, Netherlands, you name the country, and people are getting global opportunities today. So it's just going to increase as we create more talent and more skills here. And then, of course, so how we develop the talent strategy, how we recognize the culture shift that is going to come in because of new generation, Gen Z, a completely different mindset, a complete different way of, let's say, understanding rewards and recognitions, what is in it for them, the value of work in terms of the balance of work life, etc. And then accordingly, with all this change, learning needs to be reoriented. And social media accounts, a lot of perception today is about companies, about work, about the leaders that they're going to work for is all there in the social media. So I think, I know, and probably I could do more in Philips because we don't effectively put a strategy around it. Of course, I mean, these days there are a lot of content that is there, but how much targeted it is there with a given purpose to achieve something, and how is that measured from a talent perspective is something that probably needs more thought. And disruption is going to be there in any industry, right? So that's going to be there. And I think just listed out a few things in terms of basically data, digital. These are going to be the buzzwords and the keywords and the ways of working going forward. So I think we need data literate people. It's not about just the technology, it's about the thinking. Digital transformation is not about digital, right? It's all about transformation, mindset, capability to deal with change, etc. Be always okay to be disruptive. And also in terms of, I think the other part, interesting part is D&I, right? So a lot of focus is on the D part usually. So we have gender targets, balance targets, right from leadership down to the rest of the organization. But I think in a hybrid part, the I becomes more important, right? And how do you create that and nurture that I? And it will require different thinking. The last one is my personal favorite, is fewer and better is something we try and kind of inculcate in Philips, is fewer in terms of either resources or head count, etc., but better. And that is the way the organization is going to go. This is the last one. So these are traditionally how we have measured ourselves in terms of successes, whether it is from a operations part, cost part, or from a value generation part. But mostly if you see this operational measure, where we are going towards is more from an enterprise scale perspective, right? So you see because the ask for GBS is going to be scaled up, the way we measure will also probably change. Again, it's indicative and it's not complete. These will evolve. So whether it's on cost, I think rather than just efficiency, it will be a measure of how we contribute towards the ESG goals as a whole, and so on and so forth. I know he's hinting me that I've overrun my time, so probably I'll just conclude it here. I don't know if you have time for Q&A or I. Okay.